Hello and welcome back to another FPL captaincy video. We only have 4 weeks left, and last week we managed another successful captain with Mohamed Salah. We are yet to get a week so far where Salah has blanked, where we have picked him as our captaincy, and last week was no different with the 16 pointer. We have 4 more picks for this week, and it's looking like a very difficult week to decide a decent captain, so let's get straight into it. So we do have a lot of common picks for our captaincy videos this week, but they do have a lot more difficult fixtures. We've got Mohamed Salah, who has of course been here for the entirety of the season. He has a difficult fixture in Chelsea away from home. We also have Alexander Isak, again another mainstay in these videos. He has a difficult fixture again away from home, this time to Brighton, with probably the best fixture out of our 4 picks as Omar Marmoush, who has Wolves at home, and then we've got Bryan Mbeumo as well, who has Manchester United at home. So it could be a big week to, go a little bit differential. Obviously Salah and Isak are probably still going to be your most common captaincies, but the fixtures do look a little bit difficult, and of course they are away from home as well, so that's just something to keep in mind. Now this week for predicted points, it's probably the lowest we've seen the predicted points in a long time. Even Mohamed Salah is looking very low this week, and we're barely even taking up half the graphic at this point. So Mohamed Salah is still at the top with 7 and 6.4 on both of our websites, which is as expected. But again, with him having such a major drop, that is, obviously does show that it is a lot more difficult fixture, and obviously Liverpool have now won the league, which means they don't have anything to play for. Salah's just really playing for records at this point. But again, as I said, very low for other players. Even Isak is very low at 5.6 and 5.1, but Isak, Marmoush and Mbeumo are essentially all exactly the same for this week. On Fantasy Football Hub, 5.6, 5.5, 5.6. Again, no differentiating there. And on FPL Team, 5.4, 5.1, 4.8. Again, not really too much of a difference. So outside of Salah, who is always going to be, at the top for predicted points, it is very close when it comes to every single other player in this video today. As far as the stats go, as always, Salah is leading the way for expected goals and expected assists, but for expected minutes this week, Salah of course with the 90 as he always has, but Isak has dropped down to 76, which is the lowest out of our 4 picks for this week. Both Marmoush and Mbeumo are looking like they're going to get pretty good minutes this week with 88 and 90, so Isak is going to be a bit of a problem. Again, probably the better fixture over Salah, so he might be captained a little bit more, but his expected minutes are going to be a little bit of a problem. Salah does still have the highest return chance this week with 63%, but as I said, everyone is looking quite low. We've seen people in the 80s and the 70s quite regularly over the course of this season, but Salah being the highest on 63 is very low. Isak with only 60%, Marmoush with 56, and then Mbeumo with 52. For our goal odds this week, it's looking very surprising. Mohamed Salah was obviously at the top for predicted points, but he's the lowest player for goal odds this week. He only has a 37% chance of scoring and a 10% chance of scoring 2 or more, which does put him lower than all 3 of our other picks this week. Marmoush is the one at the top with a 48% chance of scoring against Wolves, a 15% chance of scoring 2 or more, which isn't too much higher than Alexander Isak, but Wolves are only given a 10% chance of a clean sheet against City this week, which is the lowest again of our 4 picks. Bryan Mbeumo isn't one to underestimate either. At the end of the day, he is still more likely to score than Mohamed Salah this week, which does always make someone a good pick. But again, when you compare it to the likes of Isak and Marmoush, he is still a little bit lower. Again, does have the minutes over Alexander Isak, which could make him a decent pick, but it is still looking like there is going to be other favourable options. Now obviously we always like to pick a penalty taker as our captaincy, but this week, despite having the highest goal odds, we obviously don't know if Marmoush is going to be taking penalties for Man City in the absence of Erling Haaland. So we've got 3 penalty takers in Salah, Isak and Mbeumo, but Marmoush, again, as I said, being the highest for goal odds isn't going to be nailed on the penalties, which is a big factor when it comes to captaincy. We do have an extra advantage for Bryan Mbeumo as well, though. He does take free kicks and corners as well, which is obviously another avenue to points. Now, in terms of rest, obviously with barely any European football right now, a lot of our teams are just focusing on the Premier League. So Mohamed Salah, a full week's rest, Isak, a full week's rest, and Man City for Marmoush, a full week's rest as well. They are playing on the Friday night, which is worthy of keeping in mind. They're going to get a couple less days. All of our other players are playing on Sunday. Obviously, Mohamed Salah is playing against Chelsea, who are playing in the Conference League, which is a factor, but of course, Chelsea have been playing, not exactly a full first team, so I don't think it's really worthy to fully rely on captain and Salah on the fact that he'll be playing against a tired Chelsea team, because I don't really think that's going to be the case. So I don't think that's as big as a factor as it would be for the likes of Bryan Mbeumo, who's playing against Manchester United, who are of course playing in a Europa League semi-final 2 days prior. Now again, as good as that is, Mbeumo's also going to be tired because he's going to be playing against Nottingham Forest 2 days prior as well. So yes, he'll be playing against a tired Man United team, but he probably will be tired in himself. So it's not as good an advantage as you would think. So far in this video, it's been very, very close between all. It seems as though everyone's got one benefit that makes them better than everyone else, but also a big deciding factor which, could very much hinder them as a captaincy option. Now into the last graphic, which is the chances and the opponent defences. Now this is usually the deciding factor when it comes to captaincy. So this is how it's looking. Chelsea have been a very, very solid defence. In the last 5 game weeks, they've actually been the second best defence in the league, which makes them the 5th best defence in the league over the course of the season. So not great for Mohamed Salah. They have only conceded 63 chances down his side as well. So they are the most strong, where Mohamed Salah does operate. They have conceded the least amount of goals of our 4 picks as well. So Salah isn't really looking like a great option this week. He's the lowest for goal odds. The opponent doesn't look like a good one where he's going to be able to take advantage. So maybe Salah, going against Salah is going to be the best option. Alexander Isak playing against a mid-table kind of defence in Brighton, who are 9th. They've conceded 55 goals this season, which is a fair amount, and they have conceded 175 chances centrally, which is, again, like I said, a pretty decent amount. You're looking at Bryan Mbeumo up against Man United, who are the 7th, and they've conceded about the same amount of chances down the middle. So a lot of chances down the middle centrally for Brighton, so Isak could be a nice option. But as I said before, the big thing for him is going to be minutes. Is he going to be getting that full 90-minute game time, or is he going to be, managed? We saw Eddie Howe speak after his injury that he was going to have to be managed throughout the rest of the season, so early subs are definitely a possibility. For Omar Marmoush, however, he's playing against the worst defence out of the 4. He's playing against Wolves, who are the 6th worst defence when it comes to expected goals conceded, with 51.2, and they've also conceded the most amount of goals of our 4 teams on this list right now with 61. Again, they also have conceded the most amount of chances centrally, which is 197. I believe they're sitting in 7th or 8th throughout the whole Premier League. There is a lot of teams who have conceded over 200 chances centrally, so Wolves aren't too bad, but they are about lower half of the table, sitting about 7th or 8th for centrally conceded chances. And then finally we've got Mbeumo, who is up against the 2nd worst defence of the 4, and that's Manchester United. United haven't actually been too bad overall defensively. Their XGC is higher than their actual goals conceded, which is a rarity so far this season, and they've only conceded 73 chances down in Mbeumo's side. So maybe someone like a Wissa could be a better captaincy option than Mbeumo this week, but obviously Wissa doesn't have the penalties, and obviously Mbeumo has the free kicks and corners as well, which does make him the obvious captaincy choice. But for this week, according to the stats, I do believe the best captaincy is going to be Omar Marmoush. He has the highest goal odds up against the worst defence of the 4. He does have the minutes. He's got 88 expected minutes this week. Benefits most from the chances conceded. Obviously, Wolves have the most chances conceded centrally of all of our teams, and he does have the home fixture as well. Now, I don't actually think, this is probably one of the times where I'm not really too convinced by the captaincy pick. So personally, in my team, I might go a little bit different than Marmoush and go for a rogue pick, which I definitely think is viable this week. Again, we've only got 4 game weeks left. If you have a player that you have sitting there that you think is going to do really well this week, there is no obvious captaincy pick, and I definitely think you could go very differential for this week. So according to the stats, it does look as though Marmoush is going to be the best choice, but I definitely think it is a good week to go differential. So that is going to be it for today's captaincy video. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you all in the next one.